When I moved out of my parents' house and into my own apartment, I had a lot of junk and stuff that I needed to get rid of. I never liked Craigslist because I always found it sketchy, especially after hearing so many stories about it. So I listed a lot of my things on Facebook Marketplace, things that wouldn't fit in my apartment and that my dad wanted out of the house. My wife set some old childhood toys, book sets, and a whole bunch of other things. The weight set was what I listed for the most money. It had a barbell, a plate tree stand, and a bunch of plates. I was selling it for $340, which I thought wasn't a bad deal. Surprisingly, I wasn't getting many bites. I'd have some people here in their message asking if it's still available and then never message me again about it. Until a few days after posting it, a guy named Joe messaged me showing interest. His profile picture was pretty grainy, but it was a guy with a fishing hat on, holding up a fish. His account info was private. I couldn't see how many friends he had or anything, only that we had 3 mutuals. All 3 of them were girls from my town. The guy's last name was also the last name of a Joe. I knew from my town who used to date a girl I was somewhat friendly with, so I right away assumed it was him, especially since I knew that guy liked to fish. After telling him it's still available, he said, "Great. When can I pick it up?" I was pleasantly surprised he didn't try to haggle the price down at all. I said him available any night after 700. He said he could come by tonight around 11 to 1 p.m. I chose to be amiable and remarked that after work, even if it was a little late in my perspective, it worked for him as it was convenient for his schedule. We were dating once, Gina. I briefly noticed the typing indicator in the chat, but it quickly disappeared. After a few minutes, he finally responded. I found the random pause to be a bit strange, but I figured it could have been anything. I brought it up, and he seemed to think it was weird, so I simply said that I recognized your name, LOL. He read my message but didn't respond for half an hour. Finally, I received a message back from him saying, "Hey LOL, could you send me your address? I'll let you know when I'm coming." I sent him my address, and he read it for many hours. By the time I arrived home from work, it was around 600. I went to the gym and got back around 7:30. I was waiting for Joe to respond, and eventually he messaged me asking for my number. I gave it to him, and seconds later I received a text from a number with our area code. I have an iPhone, and when I texted him back, the color was green. Usually I see that as a red flag and wonder if it's a scam, but I wasn't suspicious because I already knew this guy. He said he'd be over in a few hours, so I went about my business. It was now around 11 hours, and I was still waiting patiently for his text or call. I texted back to let him know when he was on his way, and at about 11:30 he texted again saying, "I'm here, come out." I glanced out my apartment window and saw a dark-colored car on the street. I tried to call him to let him know I needed help carrying the weights outside, but he ignored me. Then he texted again saying, "Yo, come out." I texted back saying, "I see you, you can come in. I just need assistance with the weights, there are a lot of them." He responded with a question about whether I was straight. I had to figure out what that meant for a second, but all I knew was that this wasn't the usual way this white fishing dude would text. I tried calling again and he denied the call again. Now I was suspicious, so I decided to text Gina and some Facebook friends we had in common. The first person to respond was Angela, who said, "OMG, that's a catfish." I asked her why she added it, and she said that it must have been a different name the first time she added it. I glanced out the window again, and the car was still there. Someone was about to do something bad to me. There was no way for me to get in touch with the real Joe. He didn't seem to have any public social media accounts, so I just closed the door and didn't say anything more. I turned off the light in the living room and kinked the blind just a bit, and I swear on my life, there was a guy hiding behind one of the bushes in front of the house. I watched until the car outside honked its horn, and then I saw the guy in the bushes run to the car, and then the car sped off. Witnessing that, I didn't feel relief. I felt gut-wrenching fear. Not only of what I just narrowly avoided, but the fact that those people now had my address. The Facebook profile was deleted the next day. After a bunch of people reported it though, I think the people who made the account deleted it or deactivated it themselves. Joe himself confirmed he had nothing to do with any of that, and that someone must have been using his pictures and name to try and scam people in the area. Though I'm not so sure it was be cautious, since we know your whereabouts. Persist in reaching out to my girlfriend. We'll see what happens. Sleep with one eye open when you're outside your cot. 2. I reported this to the police, but they didn't give it much of a priority, so I don't think they ever investigated. I'm not exaggerating when I say I haven't attempted to communicate with anyone's girlfriend at all during this incident. In fact, I was seeing one girl exclusively at the time. I suspect there's a connection, but I can't put my finger on it. I also have no idea what would happen if I opened the door. Nevertheless, I've had to live in slight fear in my new apartment ever since I moved here. Thankfully, I haven't received any more threatening or random texts, but I still check the windows before I leave my room at night. 2018 had to be the year I was in the process of selling a vintage pinball machine that belonged to my family and me. It wasn't an expensive arcade model, but it was worth a couple $100. I wanted to get it out of my parents' attic before my sister thought of the same thing. I know I'm sneaky, but you gotta do what you gotta do. I waited until my family was on vacation before listing it so we wouldn't have to divide the money. That way, no one would know. The home my parents own is located on a desirable part of town, but it is not in a gated neighborhood. I listed my pinball machine on Facebook Marketplace for $200. The next day, I received a message from an anonymous user named Jasmine expressing interest in the machine. They offered $175. I was willing to give her that number, and we agreed on a time for her to come. However, she never showed up. The following day, I had work, so I messaged her to ask if she would be here by 11. The latest she said was 11:30. I asked if we could do it tomorrow instead, but she said she was already on her way, so I stayed up a little later. Finally, at 11:45, she told me that she was here. I went to the front door and, much to my surprise, I saw a car outside. Out of the car, I saw 3 men and 1 girl. I messaged her, "Are you here with people?" At this point, she wasn't answering her messages anymore. I watched as the 4 people approached my door. I kept the storm door locked. These 3 guys looked kind of big, and all 4 of these people looked like trouble. As they got close enough, I said, "Are you Jasmine?" She said through the door. "Yeah," I said, "I can't let all of you guys in my house. My parents are asleep," obviously lying. Jasmine, so she claimed her name, was tried opening the door, yelling, "What are you talking about?" As she saw it was locked, she started knocking on the glass. I decided it was best to shut the front door at this point. I heard their voices yelling outside for a while and the doorbell ringing. I heard one of the guys, or maybe even multiple of them, yelling obscenities and insults at me through the 2 doors, making me only gladder I didn't let them in. These were not the kinds of people I wanted in my parents' house. Especially when I'm alone, I realized this whole thing was an awful idea. When I heard their voices laughing and yelling on the front stoop for like 10 minutes after I shut the door, I looked out my little brother's bedroom window upstairs, which is directly above the driveway, and I saw one of the guys pissing in the empty driveway. No, cars in the driveway was not a good look. As they finally began to leave, the girl shouted something at me, but I couldn't make out what she said. I simply thanked God and headed upstairs to get some sleep, but I couldn't get to sleep that night due to all the thinking about our interaction. A few hours after getting into bed, I heard what sounded like a window breaking downstairs. I jumped out of bed, but not before quickly making sure the door to my bedroom was locked. I stopped myself and instead quietly got out of bed and tiptoed to the door. I had already locked it. I tiptoed back to my bed and had my phone in hand, ready to call 911 for some stupid reason. I was waiting till I heard any other kind of sounds before dialing, and eventually I heard the sound. I needed to hear footsteps rapidly coming upstairs. I dialed 911, as I felt like throwing up. The footsteps outside the room didn't even sound like they were trying to be quiet. I whispered the entire time I was on the line with the dispatcher. Time was moving in reverse. I hid literally under my bed as I listened to people ransacking the house. In reality, they were in and out in less than 5 minutes, way before the police actually showed up. The backyard window was shattered. Things were stolen from just about each room. Ironically, the pinball machine wasn't taken. What happened from there was I got a police report number. I made an appointment to see a couple detectives at the police station and shared with them all the details I had, including the Facebook account of the Jasmine girl. I fabricated the story of it saying, "Someone in the house threatened me." My reasoning for this was, I felt that this case would actually be taken seriously if I claimed I was threatened. To my surprise, they did take this seriously. It seems like the detectives were able to use the Facebook account information to track down a girl who lived in an undesirable neighborhood a few towns over. They used a search warrant to search her house and discovered a lot of stuff that had been stolen from my parents' house. She managed to get rid of the 3 men who had been with her, and they were all charged with burglary. I believe that most of the stuff that had been stolen was recovered. I'm sure there were some things that were taken but never returned, but that hasn't come up so far, so it's fine. I believe that my claim of being verbally threatened may have made the detectives take this case more seriously, but I could be mistaken. Even though my family was furious at first, they eventually came to understand.